This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio Plus. It's episode 763. This week we've got Leslie Anderson, Kristy Cohen, Daryl Paulson, and Mark Springer. We're going to do an industry update and discussion on collaboration between IICRC and the RIA. We will highlight initiatives of common interest that include managing conflicts of interest, education development and advancement, and industry evolution based on ethics and unity. Before we get started, let's thank our sponsors. They're the reason we can continue doing the show. IAQ Radio's marquee sponsor is the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry at iicrc.org. IAQ Radio Association sponsors are the Restoration Industry Association, RIA, at restorationindustry.org. The Environmental Information Association, EIA, at eia-usa.org. IAQ Radio industry sponsors are Particles Plus at particlesplus.com, Tramex Meters at tramexmeters.com, EMSL Analytical Inc. at emsl.com.
And now you can win a cool prize. It's time for the IAQ Radio Trivia question. Be the first to correctly answer. Simply email your answer to czlotnick@cs.com. Or if listening live, just text your answer from your computer. And now, here's the Z-Man.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to report Ralph Froelich, Helix Environmental in Dayton, Ohio, was first to identify the integrated circuit as the invention he presented to Texas Instrument Management, for which he was later awarded a Nobel Prize. Here's today's IAQ Radio Trivia question. Name the IRS category designation for organizations that are not organized for profit and primarily serve the interests of their members, such as trade associations, business leagues, and chambers of commerce. Back to you, Joe.
All right, we've got a stellar lineup today. We start with Leslie Anderson. She's the IICRC Chairperson, and Paul Davis Restoration, Senior Vice President of Training and Launch.
Kristy Cohen, RIA CEO.
And Kristy's also partners with the volunteer leaders to advance RIA's mission and ensure restorers have a unified voice. Daryl Paulson is an honorary board member and shareholder group spokesperson. He's a past IICRC chairman and retired CEO of Advanced Restoration Specialist, Inc.
Mark Springer, RIA Restoration Advocate and in charge of carrier relations.
All right, let's get started here. I want to start with a little setup. Last May, Pete, in his role as the Triska proxy to the IICRC shareholder group, sent Cliff and I and members of the Triska board a draft version of a new IICRC conflict of interest policy for review. Pete is like he gets on something like a bulldog, or a pit bull, and he won't let go of it. And he's been on this conflict of interest thing for years, and I'm really excited to say that we're making great progress on it. Before we get too far into it, let me go with Leslie and or Daryl. Can you give us an update on the status of the conflict of interest policy development and implementation?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you for having me today. Yes, currently, first, let me say, Pete Consigli, thank you so much for all of your hard work in putting the conflict of interest together. We couldn't be more thankful for the time and effort you put into that. Additionally, it is currently in legal review, so it's being reviewed by our attorney. The next step for us will be for it to go to the board of directors for their review, and then out to certainly all of our registrants, certified firms, and instructors. Daryl, how about for you, sir?
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. Happy New Day, everybody. Excited to be here. The conflict of resolution policy is for us to declare any proposed, any a possibility of a conflict. Obviously, the optics could be that a lot of people have a conflict in their service for a nonprofit and to advance the initiatives of the affiliates they're involved with, but they're not always aware that some people might think they're in a conflict. So we've developed a form that everybody will fill out, and then they will state any possibility of a conflict, declare it, and then the option would be to maybe not discuss whatever the initiative is on the floor at that time, and maybe not vote on it. So it depends on what it is. The important part is that everyone who volunteers and serves knows that if there is a conflict, it needs to be declared, and then there needs to be an action behind that, either in a discussion. Okay, because there's the possibility of a conflict, I'm not going to participate in the discussion, because if the initiative advances, then I could be looked at, or it could be looked at, that I was promoting something that maybe could be tied to a self-interest that maybe I or my organization may have. So that's the real purpose, is to make sure everyone knows that I myself, before I speak, might be in a conflict, and then to provide the mechanism, either through a form or an awareness, or that it's brought up at the beginning of each meetings, just to keep the optics and the reality that sometimes we serve, and we're in positions that, if the initiative goes through, may look like it was self-serving or something like that. So it's a very needed thing, but it also needs to be at the forefront regularly, not every other year. So everyone should sign the form and should look at it and be honest about either the reality of a conflict or the potential that one may exist.
I don't recall. I was on the board years ago, and Daryl or Kristy, whoever wants to, I'm sorry, Daryl or Leslie, whoever wants to kick in. Is there currently a policy with that IICRC has, a conflict of interest policy, or is this all kind of brand new?
Well, that's the question. There was some restructuring that went on, and occasionally the boards do look at our policies and modify them and change them. And when I realized that I couldn't find it in the policy, and yet I know, Joe, when you were on my board back in 2012 and 13, it was there. And in fact, the form was given to every board member and to committees, and we kept it on file. And all of a sudden, I couldn't find it. And so it needed to be updated anyway. It definitely did. It was still done by legal back in that day, and it will be again now. It'll be checked on that. But we thought the best thing is to have industry leaders, such as the many on the shareholders group and many in the board. And that's why I tapped Pete to do that in the shareholders group, and let him know that it wasn't really an active process in the board like it was previously. And then he accepted that challenge, and we put together a small group of leaders and the shareholders to go over the old policy, update it, and add things in for today's times.
I wonder if we could get either Mark and Kristy maybe to comment on how similar it is with what RIA has in place, and maybe just comment on general about conflict of interest policies at RIA.
Sure, I'm happy to. And, I've had the privilege of I am an RIA shareholder on the IICRC shareholder board. And so being able to be part of that process to review the conflict of interest policy for IICRC and just knowing what a thorough and vetted document it is. We do also use a conflict of interest policy. We have that for the RA, for our volunteers and board of directors. And it's just such a critical piece of the governance that you have to have for every association. So I actually really, my hat is off to IICRC, Pete, and the team. They've done a great job putting this together. And again, as Daryl mentioned, there may be a conflict, and you have to disclose the conflict because we need to be aware of it so that we know, is it just a, potential perceived conflict? Is it something actual that you need to recuse yourself from? And it just keeps everything above board and making sure that we are always aware of those things so that they don't come back to inhibit the progress you need to make on a particular initiative. So yes, very similar, and commend IICRC for all the hard work they've done on this new policy.
It's just so nice to see. First of all, it's nice to have this show with IICRC and RIA working together the way they have been. And Mark, I have to say that you've been a big part of this, and I wondered if you could maybe comment on how things are going from your perspective.
Yeah, so I think, what we're talking primarily about right now as it relates to this conflict of interest is in our governance and, at the board level. But what's important there is that if we are going to talk about codes of conduct and ethical practices, I think it entirely falls on deaf ears if we talk about that with our constituents and our members, if we're not leading by setting a good example to the folks that we're trying to lead. So, clearly there have been issues in the past. This is something that has plagued certain elements and aspects of the leadership and governance over the years. Now we have to be able, in my view, Joe, to get back to some of our roots. And historically, I was reflecting a few months ago, I think Pete and I were talking about this, maybe Daryl and I were talking about it as well. When I went through the CR program over 20 years ago, there was a significant amount of that body of knowledge and training material that was dedicated to our code of ethics as restorers, especially as certified restorers. And somewhere, I should say, along the way, I think part of it is that there was the redevelopment of the CR program, which I think we're going to talk a little bit more about later. But a lot of those important pieces sort of fell by the wayside. And at the very center of that, I know what left an indelible mark on my mind back when I was in that training, that CR program that Marty King was still instructing back many years ago. Conflict of interest for the restorer was at the very center of that. And restorers, it's incumbent on restorers to be able to be honest and transparent and straightforward about the conflicts that they have. And far too often that doesn't happen. And Marty encouraged us as an industry to be honest about that, to be transparent about that, and not to hide behind some of these relationships that we may have that actually may impact the policyholder or the process of restoring the property back to pre-loss condition. And there's a number of those that could happen on a number of different sides. And we have to refocus on that. And that's where I really think it's important what IICRC is. I just commend them on their efforts with this, and certainly RI in the same place, is again, if we're going to expect that our members are going to be able to have a code of conduct that means something and to have transparent ethical behavior, we have to lead in that. And that's where I think this is really important.
Cliff, why don't you take it?
I've got a couple of follow-ups, actually. One for Daryl, and then just a comment. As far as Daryl went, he outlined all the people that the board of directors were going to be involved with it, and instructors in schools were going to be involved with it, and the members were going to be involved with it. There was one that he didn't mention, and this is the standards development people that actually do it. And I'm sure that they're covered, but I just wanted you to confirm it, Leslie, if you could, that policy, would relate to those folks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It would. It reflects not just on our volunteers and our board of directors, but those on our consensus body committees, those working on standards, examinations, any of those volunteer positions. And as Daryl stated, they need to declare that conflict of interest so that we can move forward, have an honest discussion about it. But yes, Cliff, to your question, it does include standards.
Mark, going back a little bit further, before you were a CR, when Pete and I went through this CR program, they actually had an ethics interview, actually, where you'd go in front of a panel of people, or a couple of people, and so on and so forth. Because sometimes there would be so many people in the class, they had to kind of split it up, and they would essentially ask you some questions and so on and so forth. But before you got that CR pin, you went through an ethics examination.
Cliff, who was Truman? Was it Truman that was president then?
Nixon.
Eisenhower.
Nixon.
Oh, Nixon. Okay.
He was a
Yeah,
Republican.
similar. So when I went through it, there actually was a survey that was sent that you'd go over with Marty. So Marty sent a survey and asked all these ethical questions, and you had to fill all that out in advance, and then he'd call you up and have a call. Now that was in 2002, so 23 years ago. So a little different than the panel, but there was still a heavy emphasis on that aspect of the program.
Cool.
Cliff, if I may,
Go ahead.
just to let you know that the conflict of interest policy is alive and well in the standards body, and it has been. So
Right.
although it missed parts of the rest of the organization to be followed up and implemented on, it was not left out in that time period with the standards. And each CB member, chair, vice chair, and our leadership make sure that has been filled out this whole time. However, that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be looked at, cleaned up, and evaluated from when it was initially implemented to now. It does. So that also is getting a fresh look at, and mechanisms put in place to verify and validate. So that's in the same process. So I just wanted to let you know that part of that. Thank you.
Well, no, I that's why I asked the question, because I was on the S700, and I know that I had to sign it and so on and so forth. So
Okay,
yeah,
excellent.
I just, no problem, good enough. Okay, Leslie, now you're in a leadership position at IICRC. You've seen other leaders before you, and I think what vision do you have for your watch at the IICRC?
Thank you so much, Cliff. And, for me, it's elevating the IICRC brand. With our volunteers, with those folks out there who want a career within our industry. I want to show them a light that will guide them to not only a job, but a career that most of us on this call have been fortunate to have within this industry. And that's through education, partnering with folks in your community to serve them better. So for me, the mark would absolutely be to elevate the IICRC brand, not just in the United States, internationally as well, and giving folks direction and clarity on how they can be impactful in our industry as well as in their communities. And we have so many amazing initiatives going on that will only give them the tools they need to pursue those dreams.
Let's go, Kristy and Mark. There was a July 14th interview by Jeff Cross in Clean Facts with both of you and RIA President Jeff Moore. Can you share RIA's plans for industry growth based on ethics and unity?
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. And Mark, I'll pivot to you after I do a little background here. But, essentially, as the Trade Association for Restoration Professionals, our job is really about standing up for restorers, advocating for fair practices, and helping to build a stronger, more respected industry. And every restorer, frankly, needs someone in their corner, making sure that their interests are protected and that they've got a seat at the table when some really big decisions are being made that affect their business. And so a big part of how we are doing that is we're taking the lead on ethics. When we put ethics at the front and center through updating our RIA code of ethics, requiring ethics training, having a formal grievance policy and process for RIA members, it gives our industry more credibility. And I believe that credibility is what's going to give us a stronger, more unified voice when we're talking with regulators, when we're talking with legislators, carriers, other groups whose policies are directly impacting restorers. So when the RIA really sets and upholds those ethical standards, it's going to show the public that our members are committed to doing the right things for their customers, for the industry as a whole. And that's what is going to build the trust within our community, inside and also with outside stakeholders who frankly have not always understood or valued the role of restoration contractors in our industry. So at the end of the day, for us, this leadership on ethics is really going to strengthen our seat at the table. It's going to put us in a better position to influence policy, to push for fair treatment, and to make sure that restorers' voices are heard in those conversations that really matter the most. Mark, jump in if you'd like to add to that too.
Yeah, so I think as far as to the unity issue, I believe that, as we've seen over the last, let's just say 15 years in our industry, we've seen a lot of fragmentation. We've seen a fractured industry. I think that was maybe at some of its height back before RIA and IICRC started some of the collaboration that we've worked on together. I was, of course, very, very honored to be a part of some of those things that started to bring the two organizations together in a way that could be beneficial to the industry instead of us harming each other, to really focus on, RIA, what are we good at? How do we stay there and not bleed out into the areas that IICRC has incredible expertise in, and vice versa. And that has resulted in us really, I think, being able to bring things like a unified fire standard to the industry. I did not think it was going to be helpful at all for there to be an RIA fire standard, an IICRC fire standard. So, a lot of people on this call were involved in that, and I think that makes the industry a stronger place. As to the issue of ethics, I think that the headline there was, industry growth through ethics and unity. I don't know that our motivation is growth when it comes to talking about a code of conduct and a code of ethics. At least for me personally, this is rooted in what is the right thing to do for our industry and what is the important sustainability of our industry. What does that look like? Anecdotally, as RIA has really looked at its priorities over the last few years, some of those priorities that have emerged deal with some frustrating challenges. One of them is the role that we've had to take with legislation that has cropped up around the country that is a direct response to situations where restorers were behaving in unethical ways. I really, I didn't have any idea how pervasive insurance fraud was until I started to hear more from, I'll call it a neutral position as I started to step into this role. When I ran my company in Montana, across 8 locations in Montana, we strove to be an ethical and professional restoration company every single day. We would get very frustrated when there was situations where an unethical restorer was performing their business or conducting their business in an unprofessional and unethical way. We felt that it really caused a lot of harm to our industry and to our business, that we were trying to operate. So that was always frustrating. I didn't realize how big of an issue it was. Recently, I had a conversation with Brett Walker, who is the head of government affairs at the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud. And I think everyone would be surprised on this call if they found out that the amount of insurance fraud every single year that's perpetuated is over $300 billion, $308.6 billion of insurance fraud is perpetuated every year. Now, that's not all in property casualty, but in property claims, according to this Coalition Against Insurance Fraud. And I haven't dug deep into their data, so I'm taking it at face value right now. It's a fairly recent discussion that we've had. Approximately 10% of property claims have some type of fraud. So there is it's a big number. And as I've started to work on this issue as to how do we have a meaningful conversation with the insurance carrier industry, between the restoration industry and the carrier industry. We haven't seen that. It's become very abrasive. We've had enormous amounts of mistrust that have developed between our two industries. And as we look to how do we solve that, how do we bring, we've got this issue that's really endemic in our society right now, which is people don't talk to each other and there's suspicion one side to the other. There's a tremendous amount of animosity and lack of communication, lack of trust. How do we start to have a conversation where we can bring these together? What we have sort of landed in is that we have to build trust. We have to build trust around the issues we can control in our own industry, which relate to our ethical practices. Unfortunately, our code of conduct is quite outdated. It's about 20 years old. We needed to bring that current. We needed to make it relevant to the restorers and the issues that we deal with today. And then we've invited the insurance carrier community into that discussion to give us feedback on the code of conduct, the draft code of conduct that we've developed. I guess we'll probably get into a bit of this later. We just launched that initiative this week. It was tremendously successful. We're very excited about where it's going. And I think it's some of the very first conversations that have happened at this level between the carriers and the contractors. Probably way overdue. But to our knowledge, the first time this has actually started to happen.
Cliff, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, actually, I just want to ask Mark a question. I think there's two sides of this issue when it comes to abuse and fraud and so on and so forth. And I'm just wondering, when we were active in restoration on the service side, there was a lot of graft, there was a lot of corruption, a lot of restoration companies and adjusters were kind of partnering on projects and so on and so forth. So it's not a one-side issue. And I suspect some still exists on the other side. And I'm wondering whether the insurance company is also, considering it, and perhaps, if they did, did some sort of enforcement or some sort of code of ethics or whatever, would kind of help the industry.
Listen, in the discussions that I'm having conversations with executives at the highest levels of some of the largest insurers
Gotcha.
in the United States, and not only those, but mid-tier companies, small regional companies of very broad scope. There is no question. I mean, as an independent restorer, when I left the industry as far as a practitioner, I was overseeing almost 6,000 claims a year. I had 300 people underneath me in the region that I managed. And, every day we had tremendous challenges in the issues that the carriers made this more difficult for us, right? I mean, our members told us at RIA when we surveyed them last year, their biggest challenges. It's not Xactimate pricing today. That's not their biggest issue. It's not the third-party consultants that were the big issues a few years ago. RIA's AGA efforts have had tremendous success in addressing some of those issues. But now it's taking over 90 days to get paid. I'm being ghosted by insurance companies that aren't returning my calls. Adjusters are unilaterally changing the prices in my scope. These are the issues that are now at really the top of our members' challenges. So there's no question that the carriers have their own aspects that they are contributing to the difficulties that we have. However, that being said, a couple things I know are true. One is we have our own issues that we have to police within our own industry. There's absolutely issues that are enormously challenging that we can take ownership of, we can provide thought leadership on, and we can lead. That's number one. Number two, so we can essentially, let me summarize it this way. We can own our own issues, okay? Number two issue is, if we're going to make progress with the carriers, we have to have a conduit of trust and communication. There's been nothing like that before. If, most fractured relationships, I don't care if it's marriages, I don't care if it's estranged children and parents, if it's in churches, if it's in trade associations, wherever it is, Usually at the root, there is miscommunication or a lack of communication. And so I think if we're going to start to address these issues, we have to be able to do it from a place where we can trust each other, where we can have truth, where we can have honesty, and we can start to talk about the issues that really affect our ultimate outcome. This is just our starting point.
I'd like to shoot over to Leslie and Daryl. Before halftime, I want to try and get this one question in. Can you share with our audience the status of the IICRC Education Ladder Initiative and the collaboration and integration with RIA's four-pillar certifications, the WLS, FLS, CLS, and ERS? And I know the acronym police are going to get me, but that's all right. We'll get that straight later.
Daryl, did you? Or I can start as well. So we absolutely have received all those designations at the IICRC. Kristy has worked very closely with Holly Kimber, our chief of staff, to have those. And currently, those are being looked at, kind of breaking them apart, looking at the current certifications we have. And importantly, Joe, working in collaboration with RIA on those designations and what that looks like as we pull them in together, we revise them and we see the best spot for them. So it's really a collaborative effort between our staff and volunteers and certainly Kristy and her team.
So it sounds like an ongoing effort. I'm wondering also if Kristy, if you could comment on the evolution of integrating the Certified Restorer, CR, body of knowledge with the IICRC certifications and leading to some kind of a career path for industry professionals.
Absolutely. And I do think it's important to kind of take a step back for those who might not be familiar with the Certified Restorer body of knowledge. The CR body of knowledge, it was developed utilizing the findings of Purdue University when they did a study on the restoration industry and with the input of many very highly qualified industry stakeholders from IICRC, RIA, many different groups in the industry. Essentially, that body of knowledge document, it really lays out the domains of knowledge and competencies that a certified restorer should have to be successful in what is, a complex and ever expanding restoration industry. So it is available. I just want to mention that to folks who may not be familiar with it. It's available for free download on the RIA website at restorationindustry.org. And it really is a critical foundational piece for creating consistency in how we develop our educational programs in restoration. And so our partnership with IICRC, hopefully everyone has gotten the headline. It's really the strongest it's ever been, the partnership between our organizations. And that collaboration has really allowed us to more seamlessly integrate IICRC and RA courses together in building out career paths across water loss, fire loss, contents loss, environmental risk. And that CR body of knowledge really plays a critical role in helping to build out our certifications and developing those career pathways because we want to make sure we've covered all of the key domains and the knowledge base that's really needed within each of those tracks. I think as we continue to work together to further develop each of those career paths and update the designation courses, that CR body of knowledge is going to continue to play an even stronger role as a key reference document used alongside of the IICRC standards to ensure that the designations and the courses are consistent with current standards and they have the covered, necessary topics included in each of those tracks and each of those career paths. So this is an ongoing process, but that CR body of knowledge is really, really important piece fundamentally of making sure that we've hit all of the key domains that we need to incorporate.
And I'm an educator. My degree's in secondary ed. It's so nice to hear that process being worked properly by RIA and IICRC, and that body of knowledge is so important. I'm just glad to hear it. Before we go to halftime, real quick, Mark, these advanced certifications, do insurance carriers and TPAs do they look at that at all?
They do to a degree. Interestingly enough, when we had our call earlier this week which was a joint task force meeting between the RIA's Carrier Representative Task Force and the Carrier Representative Task Force, I think, Kristy, what do we have, 30, 35 people on that
Yeah.
call earlier this week? One of the members from the IIC, or from the, I'm sorry, not IICRC, from the carrier group, was an adjuster who has his WLS and his CR. And he was sort of imploring us on that to see those certifications gain relevancy and gain a greater footing in the industry. So it's certainly something that is on some of their radar. I think advancing these designations and seeing our industry in its maturation process have higher and higher levels of technical training and education is something that elevates the industry. We believe that. It's why we have spent the time to work on this with IICRC. Sadly, I think that we're not as far along as we should be, but I think there's a tremendous opportunity in that area.
Grayson, let's go to halftime, buddy. We'll be right back with the second half of our show. We've got Kristy Cohen, Leslie Anderson, Daryl Paulson, and Mark Springer. IAQ Radio's marquee sponsor is the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry at iicrc.org. Association sponsors are the Environmental Information Association. EIA's multidisciplinary membership collects, generates, and disseminates information concerning environmental and occupational health hazards in the built environment at eia-usa.org. The IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry, iicrc.org. The Restoration Industry Association, the oldest and largest nonprofit professional trade association dedicated to providing leadership and promoting best practices through advocacy, standards, and professional qualifications for the restoration industry at restorationindustry.org. Industry sponsors are Particles Plus, feature-rich particle counters and air quality instrumentation. Count on us, particlesplus.com. Tramex Meters, innovation in moisture detection and humidity monitoring systems since 1974 at tramexmeters.com. EMSL Analytical Inc., providing high-quality, full-service laboratory services since 1981. EMSL.com. Cliff, take it from here, buddy.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. Leslie, there's been quite a bit of social media activity over the past several months with everything going on in LA's wildfire season. Can you share anything with our audience on IICRC's position on the initiative for California to establish protocols for evaluating property damage from wildland fire and smoke residues?
Thank you so much, Cliff. And I want to answer that question. I want to go back before halftime, if you will. I love that. And mention that in addition to what Mark shared with you, I want to share that we have had many insurance companies reaching out to the IICRC. Thousands, actually, this year alone have gotten either water, fire, ASD, or AMRT. And a big one that they're interested is trauma crime scene as well. And so I do think, Mark, to your point, the insurance industry is very interested in being educated. When they see estimates, they can review it. They understand what's being noted. They too want to be experts in the field. And I know this year alone, we're over 1,000 different adjusters getting certifications with the IICRC. And I couldn't be more pleased because I think, Cliff and Joe, this takes us right back to a comment that was made earlier on collaboration, building trust, working together so that we see things the same way. And I couldn't be more excited about more to come, Mark, in that area as well. More trust and collaboration. And so, yes, on the wildfires, currently the IICRC is not working on anything in particular with wildfires in the state of California. I know there are several folks that are working on putting things together to work with a task force that's been put together for the state of California, giving them preemptive documents, if you will, that will guide them. Not a standard per se, but more of leading documents in crisis or natural disasters that have occurred for us.
Cliff?
Let's see.
I can jump in if you want.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. Daryl, anything you can share with the audience about your role as the IICRC shareholders spokesperson? I don't think a lot of people understand how that all works, number one. Specifically, is there going to be some new blood voted into the IICRC? I was just looking at the board the other day. I'm like, oh my, this is very, I know a lot of these guys really well, but there's a few new ones in there. We're going to see some new blood in this fall's annual shareholder meeting?
Thank you, Joe. Well, of course, nobody has a crystal ball, then, and the vote is yet to happen. But I have a lot of insight, and I have a lot of things that I believe that could happen. Just don't know for sure. But I would say that there's a strong possibility that 3 of the current board members may get voted back in because they've. So I would not be surprised if that was to happen. That would leave 2 open seats. And the shareholder group is highly aware of, as we talked about Wednesday in our meeting, we had, I don't know, 14 shareholders, 13 shareholders present of the 20. And, you know, they talk about new blood. We talk about new blood a lot. A lot of us are aging out, and we have a responsibility to pass the baton on. But I like to call it fresh eyes or young eyes rather than new blood, because it's not a bloodbath in there, although sometimes it feels like it. We're serving and volunteering for free to give back to the industry that was good to us, and hopefully we were good to it, and we leave it better than we found it. And so we're highly aware of that. So fresh eyes balanced with old eyes or older eyes is really the right recipe for a good mix. And so we knew that when we restructured back in 2011 with experts in restructuring like that, where the board was 23 strong at that time, went down to 15, and our election process has been, I won't say perfected. I know Mark had some good closing comments a year or 2 ago when he got off, and he said of the 40 nominees we had for the board, he felt very good about our process and that every single one of them got a fair review by the nominating committee. And the nominating committee for the Institute's board is all shareholders. And every one of them have experience in the industry. I know of none that don't have a lot of experience. So it's a good check and balance where the board's not populating the board with its own people they think should serve. It's actually the shareholders that have that responsibility. So I would say, yes, that there will be at least a couple of young, fresh eyes. Younger, fresh eyes is a better term, because, you know, we don't, age isn't the thing. The thing is qualifications. And so I would say that. And then I'd like to, if I could, as far as the shareholder spokesman's responsibility, it's more just like we're trying to have our industry speak with one voice. Is better to have RIA and IICRC taking the lead on their expertise, as like we administer the IICRC's track of courses and their career path. We administered at the IICRC because we're good at it. We've been doing it for a long time. We have 38 associates at our Global Resource Center. And so in our MOU with RIA, we do that portion for them. And I didn't speak on this before the first half, but I want to. The career track that IICRC and RIA have are currently kind of separate, and we're trying to put those together. And so the last 2 years, we have been actively working. Well, the first year was monthly, and we'd get together and talk about where would IICRC's track of courses in the career path be, and where would RIA's. And we've got that pretty lined up, where we think one course should be before the other course, and how they're all building blocks in their career path. And so we've been doing that as part of our MOU. And so it's a good thing. And we're kind of I would say we're in our last year of refinement before we implement. And at this point, it needs to go to each other's boards and get some outside feedback. It's always best to hear anybody who thinks they have a better idea than a committee's worked on for 2 years. They don't know everything, but it's better to ask for that before you present the final than it is after, because you have a tendency to get more concerns. Why they do this, why they do that. But we're in the final stages of mending the two career tracks of education towards a career path and blending them together. And now we're looking at what other associations and education bodies can we insert into that track that are not affiliated with RIA and IICRC, but they're not our courses. So we're looking at that too, all the way up to higher education. So very, very excited about that previous question about the career track. I just wanted to let the listeners know where we are in that process. As far as the spokesperson's job, we just get all the shareholders together 12 times a year. And in that 12 times, we handle our role, not the board's role. And we keep it very separate lanes of our core competency and what our responsibilities are. Whereas in the past, the shareholders were the board members. Now we had to put the roles separate and govern them in an organized fashion. So I lead that charge with the as the spokesperson of the shareholders. And our number one function is to populate the board with the right mix of expertise.
All right. I think this is a good point to go to the roundup, Cliff. Is that good with you?
Well, I just had one final question, I think, really for, I guess I'd like to know a little bit more about the upcoming convention 2026. 2025 was great. I was there. Radio Joe was there. You had a packed event in West Palm Beach. We're going to Savannah. I just want a little teaser about what I'm going to get when I go to Savannah. So if you could just spend a couple of minutes, Kristy, and fill us in on that. Thanks.
I appreciate that very much. We are very, very excited about 2026. As you mentioned, we're going to be in Savannah, Georgia, April 27th through the 29th. And this coincides with our 80th anniversary, which is a really big reason to celebrate. We're going to continue to build on the momentum we've had over the last couple of years in Dallas and then in West Palm Beach. Few new things that we're rolling out for this convention. We very much listen to our attendee feedback, and we want to just keep delivering a better and better experience every year. So a few things that you're going to see. You're going to see some more peer-to-peer networking opportunities, looking at that Monday before we jump into our 2 days of educational programming, a lot more of that structured networking. So, if you're an independent contractor, if you are in marketing versus technology, looking to build up more opportunities for you to get together with peers in a structured way while you're on site with us at the show. We're going to have some more concurrent sessions. So we're going to be opening up a lot more variety in terms of the session content this year, looking to be much more curated. We recognize that the restorers that come to our show, they're all at different stages in their journey. Some of them are just starting out in the industry. Some have been running a much more mature business. We want to make sure that we're kind of curating some tracks and sessions that are going to speak to those unique needs within our audience base. And then the other thing that we're doing is we're changing up our town hall format. We've heard loud and clear we need more time during the show for our attendees to engage directly with RA leadership on asking questions, sharing the challenges that they're experiencing out in the field every day, providing input on our advocacy priorities. So we're going to do a whole town hall dedicated to that. And in addition to that, we'll have a separate state of the industry session where we're going to give you all updates on our advocacy efforts, legislation, carrier relations, and the work that Mark's doing, our rollout of the new ethics program. So really looking to just reformat, continue to build on the momentum. We are expecting another sold out trade show. So if you're planning to join us, please be sure to register now. Early bird discount is $6.99 for members through December. We would love to see everyone there in Savannah. Thank you, Cliff.
Thank you.
All right, Kristy, thank you. Let's go to the roundup, Grayson. We're going to bring Pete in here. All right, the roundup brought to us by Tramex Meters at tramexmeters.com. Pete Consigli, this was your brainchild, brother. Why don't you go ahead and I know you've got a couple follow-ups and comments.
Yeah. Well, first thing I want to say is I think this is the first time I can ever recall that I actually wore IICRC and REA gear at the same time to basically be an honest broker for collaboration. I do have a few comments that I want to weigh in on. I always like to do during the roundup. Cliff will put into the blog. But there is one question that I have that we had in our preliminary interview that was alluded to in the first half that we haven't addressed. And that is, can either Kristy and or Mark give any little bit of insight or an update on the status of kind of the way I frame it is the post-Marty King CR, because we haven't had a CR class in about 10 years after the body of knowledge came out. It's been in development with the pillars and with the collaboration with the career track with the IICRC. Anything that can be shared on when that may be coming, because I think we have probably a pretty good group of people in the pipeline that are qualified maybe to take that course because they've gotten all the prerequisites because they've been working on it for the last few years. So I'd ask for some comment from either Kristy and Mark and that, and then I'll kind of do a few roundup comments, Joe, if that's okay.
Sure.
Absolutely, Pete. Appreciate the question. So we, as folks know, it has been some time since we've had our last CR, and we've been very strategically looking to revamp and reimagine the CR designation in terms of the content, the delivery of that. Now that we have our 4 pillars, water loss, contents, fire, and environmental risk, we really wanted to look at what makes, the CR now distinct. And we're focusing on the leadership principles, management fundamentals, and the role of the CR and ethics as a CR. And so with all of that, we know folks have been waiting very patiently. What we want to make sure we did it the right way, working with IICRC and others. So we're going to, we anticipate launching the new program in 2026, and we're going to have some announcements coming at the RA convention in April in Savannah so that people can start planning for what that looks like. But we really wanted to make sure in the post-Marty era that we are really good stewards of the CR and what that needs to look like for the industry. So 2026 April convention, you can expect some clear updates in terms of the launch of that, because we've looked at some new formats and partnering with the IICRC on that.
Thanks, Kristy. And this will be the third time that we've been to Savannah as an association. It's been quite a while. It's a great city, and not too long of a drive for me living in Florida, so I'm looking forward to that. But plus, it's our 80th, so every 10 years is usually a thing. Mark, you got any little comments you want to make? Or because you were the guy who brought the body of knowledge home, that was a 7-year process that went through, quite a deal to get everybody on board.
I think Kristy did a great job in what she covered. Certainly, I think that it's time for us to see this, and I'm glad that there's as Kristy said, a return to our roots in some of these things. So it's really important, and I think it will benefit the industry tremendously.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So listen, here's some. I took a few little notes on the discussion points that we're talking about. this whole issue about communication that Mark talked about, that's a big thing that's kind of come out of some of the issues in his carrier relation role. It's funny that he say that because during the years when I headed up a lot of these debates that the association had with the narrowing the divide, the closing the gap, that ultimately went to the take a stand at Mark, and then the greatest need. As part of that, I happened to reconnect with somebody at our convention this year that I hadn't seen in quite a while. And the big contention at the time was of the biggest issue of the dozen issues that were thrown out there from the insurance sector. About half of them were technically related stuff, but a little over half of them were bad communication. So I said to this one person, I said, so what we were talking about 15 years ago, have the issues changed, or are they the same issues? And they said, they're the same issues, Pete. So it takes a long time, and it's a big struggle to close this gap. And anyway, Mark, good luck with you, your committee, your task force, and trying to do that. Now, this directly leads me into talking about codes of ethics. The codes of ethics. I mean, I've been on this for many years, so I'm not going to preach from the soapbox, but I will say this: in the late '90s, the early 2000s, when this kind of got on the radar, I did a comparison of the different codes of ethics that RAA, we were known then, of course, as ASCR, the IICRC, and the IEQA had, which represent our industry. I also took a look at industrial hygiene codes of ethics. The AAHA used to call them the canons, but then in 2007, they went to a consumer-based code with the ACGIH. And then I looked at two insurance industry codes. There wasn't one that I could find that represent insurance carriers, but the Independent Insurance Adjusters, NIA, have a code, and the Public Adjusters Association, called NAPIA, have a code. I was surprised in the commonality. This dates back 15 to 20 years of how many parallels of common interest there were in the codes from the public adjusters, the independent adjusters, and the cleaning and restoration industry, and even some that led into the industrial hygiene community, which a lot of their stuff was scientifically based. It was a little different, but there were still codes that were parallel. And it's always been my contention, if you want to close the gap and work with these other industries, one of the first things you should do is go take a look at their published code of ethics and conduct, because that is the way that they think and make their decisions. And if you don't know and understand that, that's where the lack of communication is. Anyway, that's my 2 cents from the peanut gallery. The body of knowledge is a big thing. Kristy did a good job of presenting that. And I believe was a lot of hard work that went into that document. Maybe now, as part of this updating of the career path and also the CR program, maybe there'll be some updating to that. But the one thing I will pass on to you, Leslie, as a leader now for the IICRC, something that I have advocated for, and this dated back quite a while. After the body of knowledge went into the final stages to be published, which is about 10 years ago, I've been pretty vocal within the IICRC circles that I thought one of the initiatives that IICRC should take under their wing, if you would, was to develop a body of knowledge in the cleaning area and in the inspection area. And the model that the RAA did when they developed the CR body of knowledge could basically be used as the model. And I think that the relevance to this, it ties in with this NICIH code that RAA now has developed, or is advocated for in the cleaning restoration industry. Years ago, that used to be called the SIC, which is the Standard Industrial Code, I think, before the government changed it to the North American Code. It's essentially the same thing. But the carpet and the upholstery cleaning industry actually had a code in their sector for many, many years, long before fire and water kind of got on the radar. So I think all these things are kind of interrelated. The body of knowledge, the code, it affects quite a few things. One final thought is that in 2008, there was a lot of litigation in our industry around a variety of things. Some of it was trademark stuff. Other of it was that had to do with ethical issues. I don't want to rehash that, but I want to say this: there's a major insurance company. They presented in 2008 at in Baltimore at REA conference, and they created a fund. It was Farmers and their companion company. The name I can't remember the name at the time, but they put up a $25,000 matching fund to raise funds to help the association fight some of this litigation. And I remember at the time I asked them, why did they do that? And that part of what their research showed was that people, and Mark, this lends to the question that I talked about, that Joe asked about what kind of value does the insurance industry put on these higher designations? What they showed was at the time, people that had went to the higher designations and certification, there were better insurance risk, and it actually they would lower their insurance proceeds. So maybe one of the things that both IICRC and RIA should take a look at is advocating within the insurance circles that the people that gain their triple categories in IICRC or these advanced codes, that they actually get a break because they're a better risk, and they get a better break on their liability insurance, which ultimately companies can operate more cost effectively. So that's been around for quite a while. And I guess the final thing that I want to say is, and this kind of lends to what Daryl was talking about. There's a lot of us now, if myself and a handful of people I could see by looking who are on the call, a lot of friends of mine that I see are on this call called in live, we're in our twilight or sunset years. And part of our duty and responsibility, I believe, and part of our legacy should be to pass on to the next generation and try to mentor and bring the next group of people up who are going to be our leaders, who will either be the fresh eyes of the new blood or however you want to characterize them, that come to our boards to take leader positions on the committees, the consensus bodies, etc., and that we kind of have this smooth passing of a baton, like a relay race. The relay race is based on 4 people that run around and have to smoothly pass the baton, and the team that does that the best is the one that usually wins the relay. And maybe that is analogous to what we're doing now. So anyway, I appreciate the discussion. I look forward next week to calling in for the annual shareholder meeting and the IICRC meetings. I'm on the agenda to comment on some of the initiatives I'm working on. I'm looking forward to doing that. And with that, Joe, I'll pass it back to you and maybe go around the horn and let our great panel weigh in with any final comments before we close the show out.
Thank you, Pete. Cliff, before I do that, do you have any final thoughts or questions?
I do not. I just want to thank everyone for being there, and thanks.
All right, let's start with Leslie. Leslie, you're the only one that hasn't been on here before, and I wanted to make sure I got your final thoughts before we go. Very interesting show. Great to see. I'm just happy to see a female at the helm at IICRC. I'd love to see more diversity on that board and more women getting involved. So I just want to say, great job.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for having me today. Couldn't be more thrilled to share this space with all of these great leaders within our industry. And my parting thought is together we gain strength. We're stronger within our industry. When we collaborate and share where we're experts in certain areas, it only makes us all better. So I welcome moving together as a team in one boat, rowing seamlessly so that we help an entire industry. So thank you.
I got a text question. I just thought I'd throw it out. I'm not familiar with this, but are certification programs of RIA and IICRC accredited by the NCCA and or consistent with ICE protocols? I can't say I'm familiar with those.
So I can speak to that for
Kristy,
our
please do.
We are not accredited for our designation. So that is something that we had not pursued, but I can't speak for IICRC. So I'll turn it over to Leslie and Daryl for those.
Absolutely. And our MRS, mold remediation specialist, is on a different track, if you will, or certification status than our other courses are. But Daryl, I may defer to you. I cannot for the life of me remember which acronym it is under.
I would say, not being as familiar with Mike's question like Joe is, I would tend to say probably not. However, I would not weaken the courses and what we do in our education bodies because it's credentialing. And there are so many different ways of credentialing our registrants, firms, and some of them are very restrictive. So if you, and also when you choose winners on who you're going to use, then you're also choosing losers. So some independence in our career track is also good because those acronyms have their own. And some people that want those will navigate towards those. And we provide some different credentialing. Some of our courses, or most of our courses, are certificates that they attended, and their certifications, people like that word. They like credentialing. They like expertise and professionals and being trained and taught in lecture-based courses by the best of the best that are available. So it's really up to the student to choose their education track. We just want to provide the best that we have to offer.
We got a text from Robbie Bradshaw at IICRC, ANAB accredited. And Robbie, we're going to have to get you on the show sometime, talk about your efforts there with IICRC. All right, Kristy and Mark, before we go, I want you to get a final word. But when you do, if you could also comment on some things I've been seeing on LinkedIn and other areas, that some people seem to be under the impression that RIA is more for the big conglomerate type restoration companies and that there's not a home there for the little guys. I wish you would comment on that before we go.
Absolutely. I think for the RIA, what is very exciting about our trade association, and, should we have been doing this 10, 20 years ago? Yes, but better late than never, that we are now serving as a voice for our constituents in a meaningful way and actually making traction with these other groups that are impacting our members' businesses. And I think one clear distinction that we have to make, our role as a trade association is we are not here to tell you how to run your business, whether you choose to do TPA work, whether you choose not to do TPA work, wherever you are in your journey as a company. If you're just starting out in the industry, or you have been in the industry and your company has multiple locations, there is a place for you here at the RIA. We have a very diverse volunteer base who is making the decisions around what advocacy approaches we take, what products and services we offer to our members to help them understand the cost of doing business, all of those kinds of things. So we're having dialogue with carriers, but that's just the same as we're having dialogue with other third parties to advance the positions of restorers and make sure that their voices are being heard in those important places that are impacting their business. So we're here for everyone. We're going to be rolling out a new independent advisory board for independent contractors to participate and make sure that they feel that their voices are being heard within our organization. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of reinforce that message. Thank you, Joe.
And, I'd like to add here that your work with IICRC, who also deals with a lot of independents, they all use, many of them use, IICRC standards and certifications. So I think that's also a big part of what RIA is doing. Mark, anything you'd like to add?
Absolutely. From my vantage point, my company that I built, which started as an independent company in Montana. My father, who started the company in 1989, was trained by some of the folks on this call. Mr. Zlotnick was where he got his first fire training, and Pete Consigli taught one of the very first water damage courses that my dad attended. We built our company across the state of Montana as a fiercely independent company. We were not part of any managed repair programs. When I sold my company in 2020, we had all of $0 of revenue from managed repair programs. Now, that being said, as independent as we were, I believed in what was absolutely centric to our philosophy in business was that we had to have a collaborative relationship in the insurance carriers that we interfaced with. We had to be professional. We had to be able to act in good faith and act as a good steward for the role that we had in that claims process. If you look back at RIA's leadership, over the last more than a decade. I think the last time that we had an RIA president that represented a national platform before Jeff Moore, who's been the president for the last year, would go all the way back to Rusty Amarante back in like 2009. So RIA's leadership, where it is today, has been crafted by independent restorers. Every single president you can go through after Rusty all the way up to Jeff is an independent, in many cases, fiercely independent restorer. If you go to RIA's blueprint as to how it actually advocates the needs of restorers and the issues our members face, it's done primarily through our position statements and white papers that we have. Those are peer-reviewed statements that have at their sort of core, the committees that develop those, more than 50% representation by independent restorers. So as we go through this process, I think that any of these allegations that have been made that RI represents the national brands or whatever, and that's where they sort of focus their emphasis. Number one, as the person who's leading the carrier relations group, my background is independent. Number two, as we advance these, we continue to stay steadfast in our approach to our blueprint, which is identify our members' concerns, develop collaborative peer-reviewed position statements around them, and then go to those stakeholders in the industry that can actually impact the outcome on those. So, for example, in my role that I have, one of the largest restoration companies, who everyone on this call knows who they are, I was able a couple of weeks ago to present 8 position statements that RIA has developed in a collaborative basis, peer-reviewed basis to that carrier in a 90-minute call. I don't think we've ever had an opportunity to do something like that before. So that's where we're going. Now, you guys have a court, kind of this is a venue for the court of public opinion. I will not go on social media and litigate these things behind a keyboard. I don't think it's productive. I don't think it's helpful, and I won't do it. That's why I put in comments on these things. I say, here's my email address, here's my cell phone. I send DMs to people that say these kind of things. Let's have a conversation. We solve these things through conversation and through dialogue, not through eating each other up online on social media. So maybe here's my challenge to you guys. Maybe you guys can have some outreach to these people. I would love to have a dialogue and a debate about this, but it needs to be done in good faith, and it needs to be done for the good of the industry, not for cheap shots on social media.
Excellent. Well said.
How do you think I really feel about it, Joe?
Well said.
Hey, Joe,
Yes, sir, Pete.
before you sign off, make sure you don't forget to give Daryl his last closing thoughts, because I don't think that we kind of got him yet in this round robin.
I couldn't possibly close out without having Daryl give his final. Always something very, very well said. Daryl?
Well, I think for our listeners and industry at large, we can see the collaboration of experienced professionals at work here today. In Mark's closing comments, we know what he's working on, how it's going to benefit all of us in a concise way, and closing it out with a challenge for all of us to have these communication face-to-face or in a better forum than just using social media. To me, as I say to the board and to the shareholders and have for 40 years now, I say, if you're going to bring some pollution to the discussion, please bring a solution. And also, I think 3 alternatives. If all you say is, I don't like this, or we should be doing this, and you don't provide the follow-up information, then to me, you're somewhat lazy. You're taking the easy way. And I would much prefer when people, industry leaders on the call or future leaders, when they look at something that's being done by the leaders that walk before them, please provide 3 alternatives. What does that tell us? That tells everybody else that you did your work. You're looking at what other people worked hard at putting together, and you're saying, thank you, I like that. Here's some constructive criticism backed up with 3 alternatives. Now, 1 alternative is some work, 2 is more work, and of course, if you can't come up with 3, but 3 alternatives means you really did your work, and it's probably going to get used. It's probably going to be valuable. So I would prefer, like Mark said, rather than social media cheap shots, to do your work, make your suggestions and your recommendations, and our industries would be better for it.
Thank you, Daryl. All right, this is Radio Joe saying thanks to this week's guests, Leslie Anderson, Kristy Cohen, Daryl Paulson, and Mark Springer. Of course, the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick, our engineer, Grayson, Gone Fishing Fisher at the controls. Most importantly, our sponsors and loyal audience. Next week, we are bringing on Dr. Jacob Avila. We're going to kind of follow right into the next show with another discussion next week of a new program they're putting together. I believe it's Middle Tennessee State, and I think our audience will be very interested next week on IAQ Radio Plus.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reel saying thanks for listening.